Alrighty, what is good? It is May 22nd right now. It is about 5:38. I'm going to do a quick little review because I got to go do some things. But I feel like today, getting a review out today, especially in this price action that we saw in the morning session, will be very, very beneficial for a lot of people. So with that in mind, immediately I want to go over kind of what I was looking at in pre-market, because today I traded pre-market for the most part. I took 2 trades in pre-market. I took one when we were in that range-bound condition, which I'm going to cover and kind of go over why, as well as that 80-point long right over here. So I'm going to go over all 4 of those. Immediately getting into the morning during pre-market, I want to note something, right? So to me, the read in pre-market was not hard at all. If we go up to the 72-minute, right here, we can see that we have this beautiful, beautiful fractal resting right here. Let me get this gray box right here. We have a beautiful fractal resting right here, right? So automatically, we can anticipate price to draw to that for a second tap, because you can see right here, this is the first tap of this. Once this is validated, we close above it on this bar, the 1:24 p.m. right here. Tap it. That is going to be the first tap of that fractal zone, right? As well as having this down bar right over here and all of this accumulation right over here, right? This was previous day's price action, basically the move origin of that AMD that we saw yesterday, that accumulation manipulation and that distribution driven event that I talked about in yesterday's setup, right? So automatically we can determine that we are looking for higher prices on the 72-minute, which, like I had stated, is usually what I always form my bias off, right? At least for intraday. So also to note, we do have, yet again, relative equal highs, which is something I always preach about, and always will be a really clean target when you are on the right side of the marketplace, right? So automatically, like I was saying, we can go ahead and determine that we're going to be looking for bullish setups going into the AM, right? And really what solidified this for me, right? This 524 low, when I got on the charts a little bit before 7:30 my time, I saw these equal lows. And as I've stated, and as Dave talks about a lot, the function of equal highs and equal lows, which are super important, and I've completely opened my eyes about them, because previously I used to think those were always going to be a draw when price formed them, and I would take trades going back to them. But now that I know the function of them, I know how to trade them properly and view them properly in alignment with the current and proper structure, right? So when we see those formed, automatically, what are we anticipating? Price to run the highs that put them in. Where are the highs that put them in? Right up here. These 2 highs, those relative equal highs that I discussed just a minute ago on the 72-minute, you can see them present on the 12 minutes, clearly and obvious, right? And also to note, what do we see on this move down that forms these equal lows? A lack of consolidation, which leads to what? A V-shaped recovery and an expansion-driven event targeting some sort of resting highs, quote-unquote weak highs, right? So with that in mind, immediately what we see right here is this big 12-minute imbalance, right? You can see price respects it. This is the 1-minute chart right over here. You should be able to see price respects this, the 50% of this, right? We hesitate to go lower than the 50%, which is already another hand tip that bullish action is likely to continue. And this little short-term downtrend is just a simple retracement back into the range, alleviating some more orders and allowing them to engage in price before we continue to send it back higher, right? And also, looking at the 12-minute right here, what do we see? We see a nice swing low right here. And what do we fail to do? We fail to close back within the range. That is one of the most important factors that I talk about, and one of the best, quote unquote, you could say filters, because it removes a lot of stuff and removes a lot of unnecessary action that you could get caught up in if you simply just wait for this specific signature, right? So we see that happen, and that candle that manipulates that low right there closes back, taps to 50%, closes back within the range, right? What do we see right here? Automatically, we see this basically failed swing right here. We fail to go make a new extreme, and ultimately we displace up and break this high over here that puts in this low. So that further validates the bullish thesis targeting highs, right? And I will say in a minute, I'll get into this, some standard deviation projections for the second trade and why I was comfortable taking it even after it took the high, right? So the first trade I took was right here, right? You can see we have this little micro zone right over here. And I want to note something relatively kind of important too, is on the 12 minute. This is the main supporting idea right here, was this right here, this 12-minute fractal. If I zoom in right here, you can see wick high, wick low. We close a body above it right here on all of this right here. That was the main supporting factor. Like I've stated multiple times, the 12-minute is going to be my thesis and where I want to engage in price when I am aligned with what the 12-minute does, right? I'm going to find my bias on the 72, and I'm going to align myself properly with 12-minute POIs that are going to send me to my areas of interest and where I want to exit the trade and where I just overall want to close a position to a point where I think the move is basically done, right? So like I said, 12-minute fractal right there. Let me redraw that so you can see it on the 1 minute and see what happens right here, right? Okay. Basically, the low that completes this fractal right here before we close, right? We put in a nice, beautiful swing low right here. Let me delete that so you can see it. Nice, beautiful swing low. What do we see happen, right? Another fail to close below. We close back within the range right here, and I am taking a buy stop entry right above here, targeting up towards basically low-hanging fruit. You can see even on the lower time frame chart, not even on the 12 or 72, because we already know we have relative equal highs on the 12 and 72, but on the 1 minute, what do you see here? A bunch of stacked highs. And we know those are going to be easy targets that price is going to want to gravitate towards, right? So like I said, for this specific trade right here, I took entry, buy stop right up here, just targeting those, and it was actually a really, really quick delivery. I was semi-surprised because you could see these candles were a little bit lethargic. You could see we were just creating a bunch of VIMBs and just not moving very strong. But once this occurred, you can see we had two very strong expansion candles going up, targeting the lower time frame resting highs, right? So that was the first trade I took. However, once we got this retracement here, the thesis still stayed the same. Why? Because the 72-minute and 12-minute dictated that we wanted to gravitate towards these highs up here, ultimately right over here. Why? Again, those equal lows right over there. This is why I'm preaching, and I said yesterday, don't get caught up in the 1 minute, because if you get caught up in the 1 minute and you're trying to form a bias and direction on the 1 minute, you are going to get absolutely smoked. You're going to get smoked to a point where you don't even want to be in these markets. That is why it's important to rely on your higher time frames to tell you the actual narrative and the actual picture, right? Because easily what could happen here is I see this wick and I'm like, oh, no. I'm going to be looking for shorts. But what you fail to recognize is thesis and bias, right? You fail to understand where price is gravitating towards. And that's the most important factor, because ultimately the odds and the probabilities are not on your side if you are in the completely wrong direction. I'm sorry to break it to you. You could get lucky here and then, but the most important factor you can do for yourself is put yourself on the right side of the marketplace. That is how you achieve the highest win rate possible. And when you do so, it's just going to be mindless executions that you thought like just don't happen, right? So second setup right here, still remaining the bullish thesis, at least for pre-market, because of what the higher time frame is dictating, right? When I see this retracement back here, what do we see on the 12 minute? We see a beautiful, beautiful CSS with an imbalance tied to it. Let me get a box on this right here. Okay, higher time frame POI. What do we see there? What do we see on the lower time frame? Let me drag this over a little bit. A nice, beautiful double imbalance with a fractal resting right there. We have this fractal right here, which I'm not expecting to be reached because of these double imbalances, but we can already narrow down a POI within that 12 minute because of these imbalances in this fractal right here. So we can understand that once price reaches that area and we could possibly get a trade off of that, that is going to be immediately high probability for us, right? So again, what do we see, right? Same entry as before, buy stop right above that, targeting right up here. And I kind of want to discuss why I targeted here and not up towards these highs, because this will be a good learning point for some of you of when to target internal points and when to target external points, right? So directly because this wick right here. Now you may say, well, didn't you just say that the thesis is higher and that you should be targeting external points? Yes and no. It depends what kind of trade you're going for. If you're going for a quick scalp, you need to be targeting internal moves when these kind of wicks happen, because this is the only thing in current low time frame structure that price is going to want to refer to before either getting a retracement, not a reversal, but it could get a deeper retracement. It could give a shallow retracement before ultimately continuing up to here where that external 72-minute and external 12-minute high was, right? So it's important to understand when you get these kind of instances where price is on a quote unquote high resistance, because this is the only thing it needs to refer to rather than all of this accumulation over here. That's an important factor to note and know when to engage and exit in certain points. Because you can see if I targeted this external point and look how much drawdown I would have incurred, that would have almost came back to my complete entry. That was 1 point away from my complete entry, right? So it's important to note that, and why I targeted here, because actually the main reason I targeted right up here and not like the CSS, which the CSS was where I went break even, which is logical because that can give a retracement back down. And if I'm wrong about this and the market's wanting to do something else, I know at least that point is going to be met, because what is there right here? There is a lack of consolidation. It is a V-shape, or it's a straight move down, which we know a possible V-shape recovery is looming when that specific signature happens. But like I said, break even at the bottom of this CSS right here and targeting this high. Why this high? If you look at this wick, what is this wick? Unmitigated. Where's the first tap of this wick? Right here. I am targeting this because I know on a lower time frame, this is going to be some form of swing high based on candlestick structure, right? And those targets are always going to be favorable when you run into instances like this. Because if you look at this right here, high resistance, but if you look over here at this trade targeting up there, what do we see? A bunch of stacked highs. Those will always get run with speed. These are going to be the ones that run into a low roadblock and give you some form of retracement, right? But you can see ultimately that draw we were talking about for pre-market, the 72-minute stacked highs right up here, was met after this retracement, and open actually sent us directly up to that, right? So getting to the next trade, you can see we started to get all of this nasty little chop right here. It was actually this, and I took it on the 10-second. I'll kind of go over it. It was more so, I'll say it's going to be kind of confusing for y'all on the 10-second because it wasn't a normal entry, but I want to go over it because it makes sense, at least in my mind, right? So right here, what do we see right here? We see a structural break right here. What does this do? This turns into a temporary protected low, right? And we can identify and deem all of this mess right up here. This is why we had this accumulation. We broke a structural high. We were at all-time highs right there, if I stand corrected. Yes, all-time highs, okay? Which already we know when we break a structural high, what is possible? An accumulation-driven event. And what do we see right here? A accumulation-driven event. And now, during all of this, I'm waiting for something to actually jump out to me and speak to me, right? This wick right here, no, I didn't like it, which would have gave you actually a good quick scalp targeting up towards like this CSS or something. But ultimately, when you understand what price does and when it moves, I will say time was a little bit of a factor here, because if you look where this happens, this is right near a macro, right near the top of the hour, right? You can see 950 begins right here and then over there. This is the closest thing to a macro, and this is why I like this, right? And there's actually two possible entries that I'll cover, but I'll talk about this first entry. So understanding yet again, equal highs and equal lows. What is the function of them, right? To me, this was the strongest signature that I could see in all of this chop right here. Why? Because we know the function of them, right? When they're created, when equal lows are created, what are they going to do? They're going to run the highs that formed them. Ultimately, what are the highs that run them? We got these internal highs right here, which are stacked highs. These are equal highs pretty much. But ultimately, what do we have right over here and over here? Stacked highs that put in these lows. All of this is intermediate structure. When we know that specific function, we know what to target in these cases, right? So let me bump down to the 10-second real quick over here. Right over here. So this was actually a little bit different of an entry because I talk about color-coded CSSs, but this kind of changed a little bit because I know, and I don't want to confuse you all, that this on a lower time frame, on a 5-second, is going to be some sort of black bar that puts in some high, right? I know based on candlestick structure that there's going to be a black bar residing in here once these equal lows are formed right here. So I took my entry so it was a little delayed, right? We got the structural break right here, and I actually took it on the retracement right down here. I think it was right about when this failed to close below right there. That candle failed to close below that candle, which dictates what? Possible bullishness, right? And you can see based off that entry, we did accumulate a little bit, and there was actually a better entry that I'll cover here in a second, in my opinion. It was definitely a more, I'd say confident entry more than anything. And that would have been right here because I know this is a 1 minute swing low, which I'll bump it to the 1 minute because you could have taken it on both, right? You could have taken it off this sweep in the break of that high. Or if you're on the 10-second, what you could have done is you could have, holy moly, I hate having to scroll through 10-second bars. Kind of just lost one. There we are. Zoom in back in right here. What do we see? Right after this is taken right over here, because we know this closed on the 1 minute, right? What do we see? Boomski. Boomski. 10-second CSS, body close above. We can take an entry off of that. Where can we refine the entry if we don't want to get an entry up here? What do we have resting right within? Beautiful fractal sitting right here, right? And you can see price never goes beyond that. And we have that imbalance right below it. Double imbalances, fractal in between. It's going to reach more times than not for that lower imbalance and tap that fractal right there, right? So that could be a tailored down entry for that 10-second right there. But like I said, my entry was over here after that failed to close right there after that break, right? Because ultimately I wanted to gauge and be confident that this was actually going to continue up to this high right up here. And like I said, once those highs or once these lows, equal lows are formed, what happens? We run the highs as I have already stated prior, right? And we can anticipate because basically if I go back up to the 1 minute, I am targeting essentially the low hanging fruit areas, right? Because I know within this price leg that this is going to be the draw right here, ultimately up here because these stacked highs, these could be a partial point or it could be a break even point resting right here because they are relative equal highs yet again. And you can see that gives a little retracement off. And then we just continue up towards these highs right up here, right? So that was the trade all within that chop. That was the one I posted, just a screenshot of under the first two trades within that like little montage video, right? So getting into this trade right over here, right? And I will say, I know Dave is not the biggest fan of standard deviations, but they're definitely useful. But in this case, for this trade, you did not need them. And I'll explain why. If we zoom out on the 12-minute, what do we see over here? A larger structural break. And what do we see down here? And I'll highlight this with a candle because this is like a, you could deem this as kind of a, yeah, this would be a double tap right over here, right? You can see price refers to where? This is a protected low over here. Price refers to where? That move origin CSS from the 12-minute, right? Like I said, let the high time frame tell you where and what to engage in, right? So with that in mind, right, obviously we're sitting through all this mess right here. You can see we do get a couple scalps. None of these, I don't think, would have given you a actual good quality entry that never breaks above. But you can see that to me, right then and there, if you're trying to take a trade right down here, you're trying to pick a bottom. And you can't do that. You need to let more structure and ideally wait for a bullish flip to ensue before you engage in anything. And that is why I waited until we broke above here to even think bullish, right? Obviously, we have stuff lining up telling us that we can and have the potential to flip bullish here, right? But the main important factor that you need to know is you need to wait for structure to form and tell you that bullish price action is about to ensue, right? You need that confirmation. You can't just be down here being like, oh, I'm going to take this trade because we're in an area where it could bounce. You'll get cooked. And I mean cooked. Because if you're doing that right here, you could have taken that loss, taken that, depending on where you're ending. I can tell you all of these right here would have been losers if you were on the second charts right here. There would have been a flip within here. That would have been a loser. There would have been a flip right here. That would have been a loser. There would have been a flip right here. You would have got an entry, but you would have withered two losers, and then you probably would have only taken it up to that high, right? Now, it's important to understand, like I said, you need to wait for confirmation to dictate that you are playing a retracement reversal, right? So once we see this break, like prior when I was talking about that accumulation in that chop we were seeing in the morning, what happens here on a fractalized scale and on a smaller scale? Accumulation, right? We see after that structural break, we get a really clean phase of accumulation right here. And what do we do right here? We manipulate all of these lows right here, ultimately moving back to all of this volume resting right within here. And we know, like I stated in that little recap or that live walkthrough that I did, that price is attracted to what? Volume. Price will always refer to it. If you look right up here, there is no volume for here. There's a couple fractals, but ultimately where everything is resting is right within here. And that is directly why price referred to that area. And even if you wanted to tidy it down more, where is the S&D responsible of that structural break? Right here. Look at this. If you want to tidy that down even more, look at that. Last down bar before that structural break, resting right there on a fractalized scale, that is going to be some sort of low time frame swing, and that is going to be your S&DR of that structural break right there, right? So knowing that, when I saw this manipulate down here and I started to see this wick suck up right here, I was immediately like, okay, I'm just going to market it because I know with high conviction that this is not going to get ran based on what structure is telling me here and where and why, right? Because if we look at the 12-minute over here, let me delete some stuff because it's getting a little cloudy. And let me change the color of this. Golly, why did I draw that over so far? Again, what did I say multiple times? Now that I got this cleaned up a little bit. What is there a lack of on this move down? Accumulation. There is not much accumulation going on here. What does that mean? Barely any roadblocks for price. And when there's barely any roadblocks for price, what happens? Quick moves, quick moves, quick moves, right? We anticipate a really good distribution phase based on directly that. When there's a lack of consolidation, price can easily run up and just make a really, really, really clean move, targeting highs, targeting lows, targeting whatever, right? Imbalances, CSSs, fractals, okay? And knowing that is what gives you this conviction on these kind of trades, right? And I also want to note, because this is also a very important factor, yet again, because I know some people, when I did some live reviews within the Discord, they had questions about equal highs and equal lows and just some more nuances about them, right? And what do we see here, right? We see some equal highs resting up here, perfect equal highs. Now, the function of equal highs, right? They're going to run the lows that put them in. The lows that put them in were right here. What does price do? Price runs this low, and we know when that happens, price is going to want to refer back to this point at a minimum, right? So we already know with high logic and high confidence and high conviction that those are going to be referred back to once we start to flip bullish, which we already got confirmation right here. So that is why I partialed and break even, right? Or break even. Knowing that is what gives that conviction right there, right? And ultimately, like I said it a minute ago, when there's a lack of roadblocks for price, you can reach for certain targets, right? To me, the obvious one was this 12-minute imbalance, because look over here. We have this structural break over here. Now, knowing this, you are playing this retracement right here. Where is the most obvious point to target? This 12-minute imbalance, right? And initially, you should have saw in my video, if you watched the whole thing, my final terminus was right up here, which unfortunately was missed by 1 point on that whole expansion, which is quite unfortunate. But the point remains, right? You can see once this manipulation-driven event happens, what happens? V-shaped recovery. Why? Lack of consolidation on this move down. You know that's a manipulation-driven event, and price is about to expand with speed, right? Immediately going towards those partial or those equal highs right up there and expanding right up towards this imbalance, this 12-minute imbalance right here. You can see we got these highs right here that form the low of that 12-minute imbalance, and we have some resting equal highs right up here that unfortunately didn't get tagged. But you can see straight off of this the kind of moves you can get with 12-minute, right? And also taking a step back, because I actually completely missed this. On that lower time frame, this is going to be a CSS. That structural break right there is that 12-minute CSS right here. Let me mark this out. You can see this is all that same thing. There's that 12-minute CSS that I'm dragging out right here. That was the main important factor, because like I said, I always like to use higher time frame POIs as entry barriers and knowing when to engage in certain areas. And that was the main supporting factor right there. And also just down here even, what is there a lack of? There's a lack of imbalances and overall just not strong movement. You can see we start to consolidate like right down here. And to me, that's another hand tip that easily price will expand up to this 12-minute imbalance right here, right? So I think that's everything I wanted to cover. This is a solid 23-minute video, and I think this will help a lot of people, especially in that chop today. And just knowing what happens and when to anticipate chop in those instances. So like I said in past videos, if you have any questions, if you need anything, join the Discord. I'll put a link down below. It's free. I'm in there active a lot. There's a lot of good people in there, a lot of cool dudes, not much drama at all, if any. And if you have any questions, either comment down below, ask me in the Discord, or shoot me a tweet on Twitter, and I'll try to get to it as fast as I can. I appreciate all of y'all. Love all y'all. I will catch you on the next video. Peace.